Captain Lee Tae-ho stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the stars blur past the viewing window. His ship was humanity's first vessel capable of traveling faster than light. After 3 months of deep space exploration, they had found nothing but empty planets and dead worlds. "Captain," called Dr. Park Sora from her station. She was the ship's chief scientist and expert on alien life. "I'm reading something strange on the long-range sensors." Lee walked over to her console. "What kind of strange?" "Energy signatures I've never seen before. Very powerful. And they're moving in formation." Commander Kim Dong-woo looked up from his tactical display. He was Lee's second-in-command and best friend since military academy. "Sir, those formations look artificial. Definitely not natural phenomena." Lee felt his heart race. After years of searching, had they finally found proof of alien life? "How many ships are we talking about?" 12 large vessels. Each one is about 3 times the size of our ship," Dong-woo reported. "Put it on the main screen." The image that appeared made everyone on the bridge go silent. 12 massive ships hung in space like floating mountains. They were made of what looked like black crystal, with sharp edges and glowing red lights. The ships moved together in perfect formation, like they were dancing. "My God," whispered Park Sora. "They're beautiful." Before Lee could respond, warning alarms started blaring throughout the ship. "Captain," shouted the communications officer. "We're being scanned. The scan is incredibly powerful. It's going right through our shields. Can we communicate with them?" Lee asked. "I'm trying all frequencies, sir. Wait. I'm getting something." A deep, rumbling voice filled the bridge. The words were alien, but the ship's computer quickly translated them. "Small vessel. You will identify yourself and state your purpose in Dominion space." Lee straightened his uniform and stepped forward. "This is Captain Lee Tae-ho of the Earth ship Indomitable. We come in peace, seeking contact with other intelligent species." There was a long pause. Then the alien voice spoke again, but this time it sounded surprised. "Earth? That name is not in our records. What species are you?" "We are humans from the planet Earth. We have recently developed faster-than-light travel." Another pause. Then the voice returned, and now it sounded amused. "Humans, primitive mammals from an unknown world. You will prepare to be boarded for inspection and classification." Lee didn't like the sound of that. "We appreciate your interest, but we decline inspection. We would prefer to meet as equals." The alien voice became cold and harsh. "You misunderstand, mammals. This galaxy belongs to the Dominion. All species serve the Overlords. You will submit for processing or you will be destroyed." Lee looked at his crew. They all had the same expression, fear mixed with determination. These aliens, these Overlords, were treating them like animals to be catalogued. "We refuse," Lee said firmly. The response was immediate. The alien ship suddenly moved with incredible speed, surrounding the Indomitable in seconds. Up close, the ships looked even more frightening. They were covered in weapon ports that glowed with deadly energy. "Sir," Dong-woo called out, "they're charging weapons, all 12 ships." Lee made a decision that would change human history forever. "All hands, battle stations. Raise shields and prepare to fire." "Captain," Park Sora said quietly. "We're outgunned 12-1. "Maybe," Lee replied. "But we're not going to bow down to bullies." The alien voice boomed through the ship again. "Final warning, mammals. Submit or die." "This is our answer," Lee said and nodded to Dong-woo. The Indomitable opened fire with everything it had. The human weapons struck the lead alien ship but seemed to barely scratch its crystal hull. The aliens fired back. Their weapons were like nothing humans had ever seen. Beams of pure energy that made space itself seem to burn. The Indomitable shook under the impact, but its shields held. "Evasive maneuvers," Lee shouted. What happened next surprised everyone, including the aliens. The human ship didn't try to fight like the alien vessels, moving in rigid formations. Instead, it darted and weaved like a fighter jet, using every trick of 3-dimensional combat that humans had developed. The aliens were faster and stronger, but they moved predictably. Their formations were perfect, but that made them easy to anticipate. Lee used this against them. "Take us through their formation," he ordered. The Indomitable dove between the alien ships, firing at point-blank range before any of them could adjust their aim. The human ship was small enough to slip through gaps in their formation that the aliens hadn't thought to protect. For several minutes, the battle continued. The aliens grew frustrated as the small human ship kept slipping away from their attacks. Their perfect formations began to break apart as they tried to corner the darting human vessel, but Lee knew they couldn't win. His ship was taking damage and the aliens had too much firepower. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "I'm detecting more alien ships approaching, a lot more." On the screen, dozens of new alien vessels appeared. This was clearly a major fleet. Time to go, Lee decided. "Jump to hyperspace, now!" As the Indomitable prepared to escape, Lee got one last look at the alien fleet. But what he saw in the distance made his blood run cold. Far behind the warships was something enormous, a space station the size of a small moon. And as he watched, the station fired a single beam of energy at a nearby planet. The planet simply disappeared. One moment it was there, the next it was nothing but space dust. "Did you see that?" Park Sora gasped. "I saw it," Lee said grimly. "They destroyed an entire world like it was nothing." The ship jumped to hyperspace, leaving the aliens behind. But the alien voice followed them, broadcast on all frequencies. "We know where you come from now, humans. Your world's location is recorded. Submit to the Dominion or Earth will share the fate of that planet. You have one of your years to decide." As the Indomitable raced back toward Earth, Lee stared out at the stars. In one day, humanity had learned 3 terrible truths. They were not alone in the universe. The galaxy was ruled by beings who saw humans as nothing more than animals, and Earth had just become a target. "What do we tell Earth?" Dongwu asked quietly. Lee thought for a long moment. "We tell them the truth, that we found aliens, that they're coming, and that we need to be ready to fight for our freedom." Park Sora looked up from her console. "Captain, I've been analyzing their technology. It's advanced, but not impossible to understand. If we work fast, we might be able to level the playing field." "Then we'd better get started," Lee said, "because I have a feeling we're going to need every advantage we can get." The Indomitable continued its journey home, carrying news that would change humanity forever. The Age of Innocence was over. The war for Earth's survival was about to begin. 6 months had passed since the Indomitable returned to Earth with news of the Overlords. The planet had changed completely. Cities that once sparkled with lights now went dark at night. All radio transmissions stopped. Earth had gone silent, hiding from the galaxy like a frightened animal. Admiral Choi Hyun-soo stood in the underground command center built beneath the Rocky Mountains. Banks of computers hummed quietly, showing maps of the solar system and beyond. Engineers worked day and night, building weapons and ships with technology stolen from the Overlord encounter. Admiral, called Engineer Yoon Hae-jin, wiping grease from her hands. She had been working on Overlord crystal fragments for months. "I think I've figured out how their energy weapons work." Choi walked over to her workstation. "Show me." Yoon picked up a small crystal shard that glowed with inner light. "Their entire technology is based on these living crystals. They grow them, shape them, program them. It's like they're farming computers." "Can we use it?" "Better than that. I think we can improve it. The Overlords grow their crystals in perfect, rigid patterns. But human technology is messy, chaotic. When I tried combining human electronics with their crystals," she activated a device on her table. The crystal flared with brilliant light, but instead of the steady red glow of Overlord technology, it pulsed with different colors: blue, white, green. "It's more powerful and more flexible," Yoon explained. "The Overlords make everything the same way, but humans improvise. Our chaos makes their technology stronger." Meanwhile, in another part of the facility, Dr. Park Sora was working on something equally important. She had been trying to contact other alien species, hoping to find allies. "Admiral," she called out excitedly, "I've made contact with someone." Choi hurried over to her communication station. On the screen was a face unlike anything he had ever seen. Blue skin, large eyes, and tentacles where humans had hair. The alien spoke in broken English. "My name is Velok. I am from the Kepler system. My people, we were free once, before the Overlords came." "How long ago?" Park Sora asked gently. 300 of your years. They came with their crystal ships. We fought, but we were alone. They crushed us, made us slaves in our own cities." Choi leaned forward. "Are there others like you? Other species who want to be free?" Velok's large eyes seemed to shine. "Many, dozens of worlds," we whispered to each other in secret. "We call ourselves the Resistance, but we were never strong enough to fight back. Until now." "What's changed?" Park Sora asked. "News of your battle has spread across the galaxy. The Overlords are afraid. They have never been challenged like that before. Species that have been slaves for centuries are starting to remember what freedom feels like. Over the following weeks, more contacts came in. Each species had the same story. They had once been free. Then the Overlords came and crushed their independence. But now, hearing that humans had fought back, they were beginning to hope again. Captain Lee Tae-ho was given command of Earth's first resistance mission. His job was to make contact with rebel groups on the mining world Kepler 442b. His ship was smaller than the Indomitable, built for stealth rather than combat. With him came pilot Kang Mi-young, who had volunteered to lead humanity's first starfighter squadron. The fighters were built using Yoon Hae-jin's hybrid technology, human engineering combined with Overlord crystals. Remember, Lee told his crew as they approached Kepler 442b, we're not here to start a war. We're here to teach them what we've learned. The mining world looked like hell. The once green planet was now covered in gray dust and massive excavation sites. Overlord ships hung in orbit like black vultures watching everything. Lee's ship slipped past the orbital patrols using stealth technology. They landed in a remote canyon where resistance fighters were waiting. The meeting was tense at first. The alien rebels had been slaves for so long, they had almost forgotten how to make decisions for themselves. They looked to their human visitors with hope and fear. You really fought them? Asked the rebel leader, a tall reptilian creature named Kes. You made their ships run away? We did, Lee confirmed. And we can teach you to do the same. What happened next was remarkable. The human crew began teaching the aliens everything they knew about irregular warfare. Tactics that human generals had used throughout history. Ambushes, hit-and-run attacks, sabotage, but more importantly, they taught them to think for themselves. The Overlords expect you to obey, Lee explained to a group of rebel fighters. They've programmed you to follow orders without question, but in battle, the person on the ground has to make split-second decisions. You can't wait for permission. Dr. Shin Ye-jin, a psychologist who had joined the mission, worked with aliens who had been slaves their whole lives. She taught them meditation techniques and confidence exercises, helping them remember what it felt like to be free. The chains in your mind are harder to break than the ones on your body, she told them. But once you break them, you become unstoppable. The first joint operation came sooner than expected. Overlord sensors detected unusual activity on the planet. A patrol of crystal ships came to investigate. This is it, Kes said nervously. When they find us, they'll kill everyone. Not if we find them first, replied pilot Kang Mi-young. She was already climbing into her fighter. Time to see if our new friends can learn human tactics. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Instead of meeting the Overlords in direct combat, the rebels used guerrilla warfare. They attacked from hidden positions, then disappeared before the enemy could respond. Human fighters worked alongside alien rebels, each using their species' unique abilities. The reptilian Kes could see in multiple spectrums, making him perfect for scouting. The blue-skinned Velax people could communicate telepathically, allowing perfect coordination without radio signals. But it was the psychological effect that mattered most. For the first time in centuries, the Overlords were confused. Their enemies weren't following the rules. They weren't fighting in formations or using predictable tactics. The mammals are teaching them chaos, one Overlord commander reported back to his superiors. The slaves are thinking for themselves. The supply convoy ambush was a complete success. 3 Overlord transport ships were destroyed, their cargo of rare minerals liberated. More importantly, word of the victory spread quickly across the resistance network. Commander No Jun-ho, a former corporate negotiator who had joined the underground, coordinated communication between resistance cells. 12 different worlds have reported uprisings in the past week, he told Admiral Choi. The Overlords are losing control. But the victories came with a price. The Overlords began to realize that humanity was more than just another species to be conquered. They were something new, a catalyst that could turn the galaxy's slaves into free beings. The human infection must be stopped, declared Overlord Supreme Valdris at an emergency council meeting. If their ideas spread further, our empire will collapse. Back on Earth, the preparations continued. Factories that once made cars now built starships. Schools taught children how to use weapons alongside mathematics. The entire planet was becoming an armed camp. Dr. Park Sora established regular contact with dozens of species across the galaxy. Each had something to offer the growing alliance: technology, resources, Knowledge of Overlord weaknesses. We're building something unprecedented, she reported to Admiral Choi. A true galactic resistance. Species that have hated each other for millennia are working together, united by the idea of freedom. As the first year of contact drew to a close, humanity faced a choice. They could continue hiding, hoping the Overlords would ignore them. Or they could step forward and lead the galaxy's fight for freedom. Lee Tae-ho stood on the bridge of his new command ship, looking out at a fleet of vessels unlike any in galactic history. Human ships flew alongside alien craft, each modified with hybrid technology and crewed by beings from dozens of different worlds. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a message from the Overlord fleet. They're demanding our surrender." Lee smiled grimly. "Tell them we have a message for them too. The age of slavery is over. The fight for freedom has begun." The Overlord Supreme Valdris stood 12 feet tall in his crystal chamber, his body glowing with angry red light. Around him, holographic displays showed rebellion spreading across the galaxy like wildfire. 12 worlds had declared independence in the past month alone. "Explain to me," Valdris said, his voice echoing through the chamber, "how mammals from an unknown world have caused more damage to our empire than any enemy in 10,000 years. The smaller overlords around him shifted uncomfortably. Their crystal forms flickered with nervous energy. "Supreme One," said Commander Thex, "the humans fight unlike any species we have encountered. They do not follow patterns. They do not obey rules. Worse, they teach others to think like them. And now our slaves believe they can be free," added another overlord. "The order we have maintained for millennia is cracking." Valdris raised one massive crystal arm. "Then we will remind the galaxy why they feared us. Ready the punishment fleet. 500 ships. We will make an example of the human homeworld that will be remembered for 1,000 generations." On Earth, warning sirens wailed across every continent. Long-range sensors had detected the massive Overlord fleet approaching from deep space. 500 ships, each one larger and more powerful than anything humanity had ever built. Admiral Choi Hyun-soo stood in the command center, surrounded by displays showing Earth's defenses. 50 human warships, the most powerful fleet Earth had ever assembled. 200 civilian vessels that had been hastily converted with weapons. Against 500 Overlord crystal ships, it looked hopeless. "Admiral," Captain Lee Tae-ho's voice came through the communications system. He was commanding the defense fleet from his flagship. "The civilian captains are asking for orders." Choi looked at the tactical display. Cargo haulers, passenger liners, even mining ships, all crewed by volunteers who knew they were probably flying to their deaths. "Tell them," Choi said quietly, "that Earth remembers its heroes. Tell them to fight like humans." Dr. Shin Ye-jin worked frantically in the communication center, coordinating with resistance cells across the galaxy. "Admiral, I'm receiving reports from our allies. They want to help, but their fleets can't reach us in time." "Then we fight alone," Choi replied, "the way humans always have." The battle began when the Overlord fleet reached the outer edge of Earth's solar system. Their crystal ships moved in perfect formation, like a wall of black death advancing on the blue planet. Captain Lee divided his forces into 3 groups. The main fleet would engage the enemy head-on. Fast attack squadrons would hit the Overlord's flanks. The civilian ships would use kamikaze tactics against the largest enemy vessels. "Remember," Lee broadcast to all ships, "they expect us to fight like them. Rigid, predictable, following rules. Don't give them what they expect." The first clash occurred near Jupiter. Overlord weapons lit up space with deadly energy beams, but the human ships scattered in all directions instead of forming battle lines. They darted between asteroids, used the planet's gravity to slingshot around behind enemy formations, and fired from unexpected angles. Pilot Kang Mi-young led her fighter squadron in the most dangerous mission of all. Her job was to get close enough to the Overlord command ship to plant nuclear mines on its hull. "Delta Squadron," she called to her pilots, "follow me in. We're going to thread the needle." Her fighters dove through the space between 2 massive Overlord ships, their small size allowing them to avoid the heavy weapons fire. The Overlords tried to swat them like insects, but the human pilots used every trick they had learned. Meanwhile, the civilian ships began their desperate assault. Captain Bak Sung-min commanded a converted ore freighter loaded with explosives. He aimed his ship directly at an Overlord battlecruiser. "For Earth," he shouted over the radio as his ship rammed into the enemy vessel. The explosion lit up space like a new star, taking both ships with it. The Overlords were shocked. They had never faced an enemy willing to sacrifice themselves so completely. Their crystal minds, built for perfect logic and order, couldn't understand humans who fought with pure emotion and determination. "They're insane," one Overlord commander reported. "They're destroying themselves to damage us." But Supreme Valdris was not impressed. "Let them throw their lives away. We have more ships than they have pilots." As the battle raged, something unexpected began to happen. The Overlord's perfect formation started to break apart. Confused by the chaotic human tactics, individual Overlord ships began making their own decisions instead of following group commands. Commander Kim Dong-woo noticed this from his position on Lee's flagship. "Captain, look at Sector 7. Those Overlord ships are acting independently. Their formation discipline is collapsing." Lee smiled grimly. "Chaos is contagious. Even they can't resist it completely." The turning point came when Pilot Kang succeeded in her mission. Her fighter squadron managed to plant nuclear charges on 3 Overlord command ships. When the mines exploded, they took out the fleet's central coordination network. Suddenly, the Overlord fleet was no longer one unified force. It became hundreds of individual ships, each acting on its own. The humans immediately took advantage, using pack tactics to isolate and destroy smaller groups of enemy vessels. But the victory came at a terrible cost. Of Earth's 50 warships, only 10 survived the battle. The civilian fleet was almost completely destroyed. Thousands of brave humans had died to protect their homeworld. As the surviving Overlord ships retreated, Captain Lee surveyed the wreckage. Space around Earth was filled with debris from both fleets, twisted metal and shattered crystal floating together like a monument to the battle. "Status report," Lee called wearily. "We destroyed over 300 enemy ships," reported Kim Dong-woo. "But sir, we lost 80% of our fleet. Most of our experienced pilots are dead." Lee nodded slowly. "But we won. Against impossible odds, we won." The news of Earth's victory spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. On worlds where aliens had been slaves for centuries, the impossible had happened. The humans had defeated a major Overlord fleet. Resistance leader No Jun-ho received reports from contacts throughout the galaxy. "Uprisings are breaking out everywhere," he told Admiral Choi. 12 worlds have declared independence. The resistance is becoming a revolution. But the Overlords were not finished. Supreme Valdris, enraged by the defeat, issued a decree that would change everything. "The human species is declared a galactic plague," his message broadcast to every world in Dominion space. "Any being found helping humans will be executed. Any world harboring humans will be destroyed. This cancer will be cut from the galaxy." Dr. Park Sora monitored alien communications, watching the Overlord response with growing alarm. "Admiral, they're mobilizing everything. Every available ship, every reserve fleet. They're calling in forces from the furthest reaches of their empire." "How many ships are we talking about?" Choi asked. "Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. They're preparing for total war." On the crystal world of Dominion Prime, Overlord engineers worked to complete their ultimate weapon, a device they called the Galaxy Shatterer. It could destabilize stars themselves, turning entire solar systems into supernovas. "If we cannot rule the galaxy," Valdris declared, "then we will destroy it before we let mammals poison it with their chaos." Back on Earth, the survivors of the Great Battle prepared for what they knew would be the final war. The Overlords would come again, and next time they would bring everything they had. Captain Lee stood on the bridge of his new command ship, looking out at the construction yards where Earth's remaining factories worked around the clock to build more vessels. Ships from allied worlds were arriving daily, their crews eager to join the fight for freedom. Engineer Yoon Hai-jin had developed new weapons using hybrid human Overlord technology. "Captain, these new plasma cannons are more powerful than anything the Overlords have. If we can get close enough to use them, we'll get close enough," Lee promised. "Humans always do." Across the galaxy, the Free Galaxy Alliance was forming. Dozens of species that had never worked together were now united by a common cause. They had learned something from humanity that the Overlords could never understand, that freedom was worth any sacrifice. The war that would decide the fate of the galaxy was about to begin. And at its center were the humans, the small mammals from an unknown world who had taught the galaxy how to fight for something greater than survival. They had taught it how to fight for hope. The Free Galaxy Alliance had grown beyond anyone's imagination. What started as a few human ships and scattered resistance cells had become the largest military force the galaxy had ever seen. Ships from 50 different species now flew together under a common flag, a simple design showing a broken chain against a field of stars. General Lim Seung-ho commanded the Liberation Fleet approaching Arcturus Prime, one of the Overlords' most important slave worlds. The planet produced the rare crystals that powered their entire empire. If the Alliance could capture it, they would strike a major blow against Overlord technology. General called his tactical officer. We're detecting massive defensive installations around the planet. The Overlords have turned it into a fortress. Lim studied the scanner readings. Hundreds of orbital weapons platforms surrounded Arcturus Prime. The planet's surface was covered with crystal towers that could fire deadly energy beams into space. They're afraid, Lim said with satisfaction. Good. Fear makes them predictable. On the planet below, millions of enslaved aliens worked in the crystal mines, watched by Overlord guards. They had heard whispers of the human-led rebellion, but many found it hard to believe that freedom was possible. In one of the deepest mines, a group of reptilian workers quietly passed messages between themselves. Their leader, an old miner named Gek, had been a slave for over 60 years. The humans are really coming? Asked a younger worker. The underground radio says yes, Gek replied. They say humans don't abandon their friends. Meanwhile, in Earth's command center, hacker Bayan Suk worked furiously at her computer terminals. She had been trying for months to break into the Overlord communication network. If she could disrupt their coordination, it would give the Alliance fleets a huge advantage. I'm in, she called out suddenly. I've found a weakness in their quantum encryption. Admiral Choi hurried over to her station. What can you do with it? I can listen to their military communications. Better than that, I can send false orders, make their fleets think they're getting commands from their own headquarters. Bay's breakthrough came at the perfect time. The Alliance was planning its most ambitious operation yet. Simultaneous attacks on 12 Overlord strongholds. Success would require perfect coordination between dozens of different fleets. Ambassador Han Ki-woo had spent months negotiating with the Zephyrians, the only species that had ever successfully resisted Overlord conquest. Their homeworld existed in a parallel dimension, making it impossible for the crystal ships to reach. We have stayed neutral for 1,000 years, the Zephyrian leader told Han through a shimmering portal. Why should we risk everything for mammals we barely know? Because isolation is not the same as freedom, Han replied. The Overlords grow stronger every day. Eventually, they will find a way to reach even your dimension. Help us stop them now or face them alone later. The Zephyrian leader was silent for a long moment. Your species fascinates us, human. You have been free for such a short time, yet you understand its value better than races who remember ancient liberty. Very well. We will provide you with phase shift technology. Your ships will be able to appear and disappear at will. The siege of Dominion Prime began at dawn, Galactic Standard Time. It was the Overlord's fortress world, a planet covered entirely in crystal structures that housed their military command. Captain Lee Tae-ho led the assault fleet, now grown to over 1,000 ships. The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Alliance vessels equipped with Zephyrian phase shift technology appeared inside the Overlord defensive perimeter, striking at the crystal towers before vanishing again. This is impossible, screamed an Overlord commander. Our sensors show no ships, but we're taking massive damage. General Lim's liberation of Arcturus Prime happened simultaneously. His forces used a new tactic developed by human military scientists, combined arms, warfare that integrated the unique abilities of different species. The bird-like Aryan pilots could fly in atmospheres, where other beings would die. The insect-like hive species could communicate instantly across vast distances. The gaseous nebula beings could phase through solid matter. Each species fights according to their nature, Lim explained to his officers. United, we become something greater than the sum of our parts. The battle for Arcturus Prime lasted 3 days. Overlord crystal towers fell one by one as Alliance forces used every trick humans had ever learned about siege warfare. But it was the planet's slave population that provided the decisive advantage. When the first human dropships landed, Gek and his fellow miners were ready. They had spent weeks preparing, using mining equipment to tunnel beneath Overlord defensive positions. Today we are slaves, Gek told his people, as explosions lit up the sky above them. Tonight we will be free. The slave uprising coordinated perfectly with the Alliance assault. As Overlord forces tried to repel the invasion from space, they found themselves fighting rebels in their own command centers. But the Overlords were not helpless. Their fleet at Dominion Prime fought back with devastating efficiency. Crystal ships that had served the Empire for centuries unleashed their full power against the Alliance forces. Captain Lee watched from his flagship as one of his escort carriers disappeared in a flash of red energy. "Status report?" "We're taking heavy casualties," reported Commander Kim Dong-woo. "The Overlord's defensive grid is stronger than we expected." The siege dragged on for 8 months. Both sides poured everything they had into the battle. Alliance reinforcements arrived weekly, bringing fresh ships and crews from across the galaxy. The Overlords called in reserve fleets from the furthest reaches of their empire. Engineer Yoon Hai-jin worked around the clock to develop new weapons and defenses. "Captain, I've modified our plasma cannons with Zephyrian phase technology. They can now fire through solid matter." "Outstanding," Lee replied. "How soon can we install them on the fleet?" "Already done, sir. I've been working on this for months." The breakthrough came when Hacker Bay discovered something alarming in the Overlord communications network. Hidden beneath layers of military traffic was information about a secret project. "Admiral," she called urgently to Choi, "I found something called the Galaxy Shatterer. From what I can decode, it's some kind of ultimate weapon." Dr. Park Sora analyzed the stolen data with growing horror. "This device can destabilize stars. They could destroy entire solar systems." The Alliance leadership held an emergency meeting. Representatives from 50 species gathered in a secure location to discuss the threat. "If the Overlords have this weapon," said Ambassador Han, "they could destroy Earth, our homeworlds, everything we're fighting for. Then we have to stop them," declared General Lim, "whatever it takes." Captain Lee studied intelligence reports from deep inside Overlord territory. The weapon is being built on their homeworld in the core of the planet. Getting to it would require fighting through their entire remaining fleet. "How many ships are we talking about?" asked Admiral Choi. "Every Overlord vessel in the galaxy. They've recalled everything to protect their homeworld. We're looking at 10,000 enemy ships." The Alliance fleet had grown to nearly 3,000 vessels, but they were still outnumbered more than 3 to 1. Worse, they would be attacking the most heavily defended world in Overlord space. As preparations began for what everyone knew would be the final battle, strange reports began coming in from across the galaxy. Some Overlord nobles were questioning their leadership's methods. "The war has cost too much," intercepted transmissions revealed. "Perhaps it is time to consider peace." Dr. Shin Ye-jin, who had studied Overlord psychology, found this development fascinating. "They're not as unified as they appear. The stress of losing is causing cracks in their society. But Supreme Valdris crushed all dissent with brutal efficiency. Overlord nobles who questioned the war were imprisoned or executed. The Crystal Empire would fight to the end. On the Crystal homeworld, final preparations for the Galaxy Shatterer neared completion. The weapon was built deep in the planet's core, powered by the life force of the world itself. When activated, it could reach across space and destroy any star system in the galaxy. "Soon," Valdris told his remaining commanders, "we will teach the mammals the price of defying us. Their homeworld will be the first to burn. Then we will destroy every system that dared to rebel." The Alliance prepared for what they all knew was a suicide mission. 3,000 ships against 10,000. A desperate assault on the most fortified world in the galaxy. The odds were impossible, but they had learned something from humanity that the Overlords never understood. Sometimes, impossible things happen when people fight for something greater than themselves. Captain Lee stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking out at the largest fleet in galactic history. Human ships flew alongside vessels from dozens of alien species, all united by the dream of freedom. "All ships," he broadcast. "This is our moment. Not just humans, not just any single species, but all of us together. We go now to face the darkness that has ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. We may not all return, but our children will be free." The fleet jumped to hyperspace, heading for the final battle that would determine the fate of every living being in the galaxy. The crystal homeworld of Valdris Prime hung in space like a massive jewel, surrounded by the largest fleet the galaxy had ever seen. 10,000 Overlord ships formed defensive rings around their capital. their black crystal hulls reflecting the light of the system's dying red. Starfleet Admiral Park Chan-woo commanded. The Alliance assault force from his flagship Freedoms, done 3,000 ships from 50 different worlds, had come for this final battle. The largest gathering of free beings in galactic history. Admiral, reported his sensor operator. The Overlord fleet is in perfect formation. They're not moving to engage us. Park studied the tactical display. The enemy ship sat motionless like a crystal wall between the Alliance and the planet. They're protecting something. The intelligence reports about this galaxy shatterer must be true. In the depths of Valdris Prime, scientist Dr. Oh Min-jun worked frantically in his laboratory. He had been studying fragments of Overlord technology for years, trying to understand how their weapons worked. Now, with reports of a star-killing device, his research had become desperately important. The crystals store massive amounts of energy, he explained to his team over the communication link. If they've built a device large enough, it could theoretically channel the power of an entire planet into a focused beam. How do we stop something like that? Asked Admiral Park. We have to get to the source, Dr. O replied. The weapon must be powered by the planet's core. If we can disrupt that connection, Elite Guard Captain Song Nari was already preparing for the ground assault. Her team of commandos included the best soldiers from a dozen different species: humans, reptilian warriors, flying scouts, and others trained in combined combat techniques. This is a suicide mission, one of her sergeants pointed out. Even if we reach the planet's surface, we'll be fighting through their entire army. Maybe, Song replied, checking her weapons. But someone has to try. The battle began when the Alliance fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Valdris system. Immediately, long-range Overlord weapons opened fire. Beams of crystal energy reached across space, trying to destroy the attacking ships before they could get close. Admiral Park split his forces into 3 groups, just as Captain Lee had taught them. The main battle fleet would engage the Overlord ships directly. Fast attack squadrons would try to punch through their defenses. The 3rd group, including the transport ships carrying Song's commandos, would attempt to reach the planet. All ships, Park broadcast, remember what we're fighting for. Not just our own freedom, but the freedom of every being in the galaxy. The space battle was chaos beyond imagination. Thousands of ships maneuvered through 3 dimensions, firing everything they had. Overlord crystal vessels unleashed their full power. But the Alliance ships fought with the unpredictable tactics they had learned from humanity. Captain Lee, now promoted to Admiral, led the breakthrough attempt. His ships used every trick developed during years of warfare: phase shift technology, coordinated pack attacks, and kamikaze runs against the largest enemy vessels. Concentrate fire on the command ships, Lee ordered. If we can disrupt their coordination, their formations will collapse. But the Overlords had learned from their previous defeats. They had adapted their tactics, becoming less rigid and more flexible. The battle was more even than any previous engagement. On Valdris Prime, Supreme Valdris monitored the battle from his crystal throne deep underground. Around him, technicians worked to complete the final preparations for the galaxy shatterer. How long until the weapon is ready? He demanded. 2 hours, Supreme One, replied the chief engineer. But the targeting systems require precise calibration. If we fire too soon, the beam might miss Earth entirely. Then we wait, Valdris decided. Let them exhaust themselves against our defenses. When the weapon is ready, their homeworld dies first. The space battle raged for hours. Both sides took massive casualties as thousands of ships fought in the narrow space around Valdris Prime. Alliance vessels used their superior maneuverability to strike at enemy weak points, while Overlord ships relied on their powerful weapons and heavy armor. Captain Song's assault transports finally broke through the orbital defenses, but at terrible cost. Of the 50 ships that started the mission, only 12 reached the planet's surface. This is it, Song told her commandos as they prepared to land. Everything depends on us now. The surface of Valdris Prime was a nightmare landscape of crystal spires and defensive installations. Song's forces landed in the middle of an army of Overlord ground troops, massive crystalline warriors that moved like living mountains. Spread out, Song ordered. Use the terrain. Don't let them surround you. The ground battle was as chaotic as the space combat above. Human soldiers worked alongside alien warriors, each species using their natural abilities. The bird-like Aryans provided air support, while the insect-like hive troops tunneled underground to attack from unexpected directions. Meanwhile, Dr. O worked desperately to find a weakness in the Galaxy Shatterer. Using data stolen by Hacker Bay, he had built a computer model of the weapon. "I think I found something," he reported to Admiral Park. "The weapon draws power from the planet's core through a series of crystal conduits. If we can overload those conduits, the feedback should destroy the entire system." "What do you need?" Park asked. "A nuclear device placed directly at the power source, but someone would have to carry it into the planet's core manually. The radiation and pressure down there would kill anyone in minutes." Captain Lee, listening to the conversation, made a decision that surprised everyone. "I'll do it." "Sir," protested Commander Kim, "that's a suicide mission." "Someone has to," Lee replied. "And I've been fighting these crystal monsters longer than anyone. It should be me." As Lee prepared for his final mission, the space battle reached its climax. The Alliance fleet had been reduced to fewer than 1,000 ships, but they had inflicted massive damage on the Overlord defenses. Thousands of crystal vessels floated dead in space, their lights extinguished forever. Admiral Park made the difficult decision to order the final assault. "All remaining ships follow me in. We're going to ram their command vessel." The last Alliance ships dove straight at the massive Overlord flagship, firing everything they had. It was a desperate gamble, but it worked. The enemy command ship exploded in a brilliant flash, taking dozens of other Overlord vessels with it. On the planet's surface, Song's commandos fought their way toward the entrance to the underground complex where the Galaxy Shatterer was hidden. They had lost half their number, but the survivors pressed on. "The entrance is just ahead," reported one of her scouts. "But it's heavily defended." Song looked at her remaining troops, barely 20 soldiers from half a dozen species. "Then we go through them. For freedom." The final assault was heroic beyond words. Song's commandos charged the Crystal Guardians protecting the entrance, knowing they would probably die, but their sacrifice opened the way for Captain Lee. Lee descended into the planet's core alone, carrying the nuclear device that would either save the galaxy or destroy it. The heat and radiation were incredible, but his environmental suit held together long enough. At the center of Valdris Prime, he found the Galaxy Shatterer, a massive crystal formation that pulsed with the power of the entire planet. Energy conduits as thick as starship hulls carried power from the planetary core. "This is Captain Lee," he broadcast on all frequencies. "I'm in position. Beginning final countdown." Above ground, the space battle was ending. The Alliance fleet was almost destroyed, but so was the Overlord Armada. Both sides had fought themselves to exhaustion. Supreme Valdris, realizing his fleet was defeated, gave the order to fire the Galaxy Shatterer early. "Target Earth! Fire now!" The weapon began to charge, drawing power from the planet's core. But Lee was ready. He activated the nuclear device just as the Galaxy Shatterer reached full power. The explosion was unlike anything in galactic history. The nuclear blast disrupted the energy flow just as billions of terawatts of power surged through the crystal conduits. The feedback created a chain reaction that spread throughout the entire crystal matrix of the planet. "Warning," screamed Overlord technicians. "Power surge in all systems. We're losing containment." The Galaxy Shatterer exploded with the force of a supernova, but instead of firing outward at Earth, the energy was trapped within the planet's crystal structure. Valdris Prime began to tear itself apart from the inside, but the destruction didn't stop there. The massive gravitational disturbances created by the weapon's malfunction began affecting nearby star systems. The weapon that was meant to destroy individual planets was instead ripping holes in the fabric of space itself. "Admiral," reported Dr. O in horror, "the gravitational waves are spreading. They're going to destabilize dozens of star systems." The final irony was complete. The Overlord's ultimate weapon had become the instrument of their own destruction. But in destroying their enemies, they had also doomed much of the galaxy. As Valdris Prime exploded in a blaze of crystal fire, the surviving ships of both fleets fled the system. The war was over, but at a cost no one had imagined. Captain Lee's sacrifice had saved Earth and defeated the Overlords. But the Galaxy Shatterer's malfunction had created something far worse. An expanding wave of destruction that would see